Hello and welcome back to the Women Podcast. My name is Marie and I am so happy you are here. I feel more and more strongly in my work with women in circle and around their births and pregnancies and beyond that, and also in my private life, how powerful the connection to and between women is. For me, this podcast is not only about inspiration, and it is certainly not about having to be more like someone else or that we necessarily have to learn something from each other. For me, this podcast is about remembering. By hearing a woman connected and grounded in herself, we remember ourselves. It is about remembering who we truly are, remembering our abundance and wholeness. Women are magical beings and are full of surprises and treasures and the earth's wisdom itself. I invite you to allow yourself to be reminded of who you are when you listen to the conversations on the Women Podcast. Please reach out to me if you feel like it, if you have questions or if you want to dive deeper into certain topics. You find all my contact information in the show notes. Thank you so for being here. So much love to you. Welcome, beautiful Kathleen, to the Women Podcast. I am so excited. I'm so excited to have you here. We've met before. We've met in person. You've been to some of my classes and you know, it's always interesting because I meet a lot of people every week that I don't know, but definitely some people stand out for me. You know, like some people I'm like, who is this person? And it would be nice to chat, but then usually there's like a class or something, so there's no time for it. But you were one of these people who, when you came back, I was like, I think I know you, I remember you. And then I remembered your name when you told me. And yeah, I'm just so excited that now we sit here and we get to hear your beautiful birth story. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And I've been listening to your podcast for a while, so I can't remember if it was the podcast that I found first or your classes, you know, the sound healing and the women's circle. I can't remember which came first, but both of them have been such enjoyable things in these last months of pregnancy. So it's been such a pleasure listening to your podcast and then also attending your classes. So yeah, it's so nice to sit here together now and yeah, connect.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you. I would love if you could say a few words about yourself. And you've listened to the podcast, so you probably know I'm not looking for, you know, the perfect bio and, you know, things like that. But just who are you right now, especially in this very, you know, very special time. You are just a few weeks postpartum. Who is Kathleen, who's sitting here with me?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm a new mama. Actually, today is Lenny's 1 month birthday. So exactly 4 weeks ago, on February 11th, I gave birth to Lenny. Got this beautiful little soul. And yeah, it's hard to believe that I've been a mom now for 4 weeks. But it's been an amazing journey just these past weeks. And yeah, so it's a new part of my identity that I'm kind of discovering day by day, moment by moment with little Lenny. But yeah, we've made ourselves a home here in Berlin. It's been, I think, 4.5 years that my husband and I have been living in Berlin. I work as an international educator, as a teacher in international schools all over the world. So Berlin is the fourth place that we've moved as a family.
Wow.
Yeah, and yeah, Berlin has kind of become home now, I think. You know, I thought maybe I would stay here 3 or 4 years, but now we've kind of set up roots and are very, very happy here in Berlin. So yeah, this is where I'm discovering motherhood. And yeah, I think we'll be here for a while longer as Lenny kind of grows up over the coming months and years. But yeah, I guess, yeah, I'm a mother, I'm a woman. I'm an
Mhm.
educator and teacher,
Mhm.
mostly with elementary school,
Mhm.
teaching in the elementary school space. But I've also been immersed in the world of yoga and meditation for years and years. So I've done some teacher trainings, and sometimes teach my friends or
Mhm.
my students at school, um,
Mm.
colleagues, that kind of thing, just always on the side.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that space has also kind of immersed me in this more spiritual, magical side of pregnancy and birth, and
Mm.
really connecting with the body. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think that's also a big part of who I am ever since I was maybe 15 or 14 and attended my first yoga class.
Mm.
A big part of my life has involved that over the decades now. So,
Mm.
so yeah, I think all of that has also supported me in how I viewed my body throughout pregnancy, and
Mm.
how I viewed the labor and the
Mm.
birth of Lenny. So yeah, I think those are big parts of myself. I'm originally from Canada, so
Mm. I was wondering where you're from.
yeah, yeah, I was born and raised in Ottawa, but I've
Mm.
been living abroad now. I think the last 13 years or so. It's
Mm.
been a while. So
Mm.
I used to be in international development work, so
Mm.
working in kind of human rights and mostly in the
Mm.
women's space, a lot of kind of feminist organization.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I had done my undergrad and my master's in women and gender studies.
Mhm.
And that also was a big path in learning about birth, because I was learning
Mm.
all about um, kind of the politics of birth and women's reproductive health from a feminist lens. And I
Mhm.
think that really impacted the way in which I view,
Yeah.
yeah, the medicalization of birth,
Yeah.
but also how empowering birth can be when
Mm.
women are kind of put at the center of birth. So, yeah, that all started in my early 20s with my university, had a big impact on,
Mm.
yeah, how I always imagined my own pregnancy and birth. So
Mhm.
here I am, 16 years later, pregnant and ready to give birth, and all of what I learned in my early 20s really started to come back to me. The
Mm.
books I had read, Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin, Orgasmic Birth, The
Mhm.
Business of Being Born, all of these things that I had immersed myself in
Yeah.
decades ago have kind of come back. Um, Very present for me throughout my pregnancy. So,
Mm.
yeah, my old studies are very much connected to, yeah, who I've become and who I am now as a mother. So, yeah,
Mm.
I don't know if that a bit of a ramble, but yeah, that is a kind of who I am now and what comes to my mind a little bit.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, uh,
Mm.
of course, a friend, a wife. So,
Mhm.
yeah, a little bit of everything.
Mm. Wow, I love that. And it's so interesting for me right now because we've never, we've met quite a few times, but we never got the chance to really talk in this way. So I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. I need to invite you on again because actually, what you just talked about, birth being, a feminist issue, but also a human rights issue. So that is so like left out of the whole conversation so often. I
Mhm.
think many women have no idea that they have rights when they when they give birth and when they go, to any institution, a hospital or wherever else. And I sometimes, that was part of my training too. But I sometimes struggle to convey that message in a way, because we're all these feminist women now, especially here in Berlin. We're all like,
Yeah.
doing it. I actually just released a post about doing it all and all of that.
Mhm.
And so this birth space is such a blind spot of all
Mhm.
of these things that we talk about. It's
Mhm.
like we are these feminist women, but then we go into birth and we're back like 100 years or more.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's why it's so important, like the work you're doing as a doula,
Mm,
some of the training that I did to really support women in being able to advocate for themselves, because
mm,
I think you can get lost in the system a little bit with birth, and it has the potential to be so powerful and
mhm,
empowering. But if you
mhm,
don't know all your options and your choices, then
mm,
that can very much be taken away. So I think the role of the doula is so important in this
mm,
time where We might not always know all of our choices, and we just
Mhm.
kind of get into the system. And so many women are so busy working,
Yeah.
clean. So, unless you're prioritizing all this research into the world of pregnancy and birth, you
Mm.
kind of might not realize what you're getting into until it's maybe a little bit too late.
Yeah.
I know so many women that had pretty challenging birth stories for their first birth, and then it's
Mm.
with the second or the third baby that they really dive
Mm.
in and learn all about their options. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I was really fortunate, I think, to have had some studies and all these influences in my
Mm.
20s that kind of came
Mm.
back to me now in my mid 30s. So I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah. And just to, mirror that back to you, yes, fortunate, but also you made some conscious choices,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes I think we're going a little bit too far with saying, oh, she's just lucky. She's not just lucky. She also made choices in her life that led her towards where she, in this case, you are right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I took, my pregnancy and birth preparation almost like a full-time job. Like,
Mm.
I mean, I'm a very curious, open-minded person to begin with. So,
Mhm.
even before I became pregnant, I was so fascinated by the world of pregnancy and birth and just the female body. I find it
Mm.
so incredible. So, I was one of those people that was already reading birth stories, even on YouTube, watching, birth vlogs or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
I just find it so fascinating and
Mhm.
beautiful and amazing. So
Mhm.
even before becoming pregnant, I just
Yeah.
loved this whole world of birth. And
Yeah.
so once I did become pregnant, I was deep diving into the research and, wanting
Mm.
to ensure and set myself up for what could be the most positive, kind of
Mm.
empowering
Mm.
experience, knowing that, things can go all kinds of different ways. So keeping a
Mhm.
very open mind for knowing that, you had some element of control,
Mhm.
but not all, so a lot of surrender and letting go to what might
Mm.
be, but doing whatever I could within my power to be as, prepared as possible and
Mm.
to know my options. I think that
Mm.
was a really big thing, choosing the right type of care provider. Um,
Mhm.
I think there's so much that can go into it.
Yeah.
Um, but I was just fascinated and very eager to learn as much as I possibly could about pregnancy, labor, postpartum, the
Mhm.
whole thing.
Wow. I love that so much. I'm like, sitting here falling in love with you. So I love that so much. And it's so important to talk about these things.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I was so eager to reach out to you and share my own birth story, because I think,
Mm.
like, for me at least, listening to birth stories, your podcast and others, it was such a huge part in building
Mm.
up my own confidence and
Mm.
feeling really excited and inspired and
Mm.
motivated for
Mm.
birth. Like, it really helped eliminate any sort of fear or anxieties about birth, and I wish, we heard more of these positive
Yeah.
stories. So I almost feel like it's a responsibility of mine to share the birth
Mm.
stories for anybody that's thinking about being pregnant or
Mm.
already pregnant and
Mm.
haven't made some of those decisions yet, maybe about where to give birth or
Mm.
what kind of provider they want to have. So
Mm.
I just feel like it's something that I really feel is so important to share and hopefully can impact the
Yeah.
birth experiences of future moms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I know that it will because because these stories are just so powerful. Yeah, amazing. We've already covered, like, usually my first question for birth stories is, kind of what did you know before even falling pregnant, and like how, did you go into your pregnancy? Um, if you feel like there's anything missing from that side, maybe even, did you prepare for becoming pregnant, or was it like, a little, oh, now I'm pregnant, surprise. Anything that's missing for that part of the story?
Yeah, well, I had wanted to become pregnant for quite a while, so I
Mm.
was more waiting a little bit for my husband to be ready. And then
Mm.
once we were both ready, I think I had this idea that I would fall pregnant quite quickly, as
Mm.
maybe a lot of women do when they're first trying. And
Yeah.
then that wasn't the case for us. It took a while, almost a
Mm.
year and a half, I think it
Mm.
was. So I had I had to process a lot of, again, kind of letting go of this idea of control, trying to
Mm,
make everything perfect to become pregnant and,
mm,
then putting pressure on myself and all of that
mm.
was a pretty challenging time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of learning that took place even in the whole trying to conceive process, because it did take us a while.
Mm,
And I think that also has impacted my whole perspective on pregnancy and birth. Like once I finally became pregnant, I was just so grateful to
mm,
be pregnant and knowing that, maybe this pregnancy won't even last. Maybe it will result in a
mm.
miscarriage, but just being so grateful that I actually did become pregnant and that I could get pregnant. Because
Yeah.
when you go through this trying to conceive journey, you can have a lot of doubts and fears that come up, thinking that maybe it will never happen,
Mm,
processing this idea of maybe never becoming a mother in this way.
mm,
So that was a pretty challenging time, but I think it did give me some really good perspective for when I did become pregnant, and just being so grateful for the
mm,
experience and truly loving every single day of being pregnant. Even moments that felt uncomfortable when I was 9 months pregnant, cycling around Berlin or, trying to go to bed and, twisting and turning with this bowling ball kind of size belly in
Yeah.
front of me. But again, a little bit of luck, but a lot of, yeah, mental preparation and
Mm,
past experiences that helped me, I think, feel very grateful to be pregnant.
mm,
But yeah, I was very fortunate throughout my pregnancy. I didn't get a lot of the negative symptoms that people talk
mm,
about, so I never really got the morning sickness or major fatigue or anything. I just was so excited to be pregnant and
mm,
maybe focusing a lot on the positive aspects, the positive changes that were happening in my body, and
mm,
just observing them and being so fascinated by them. And um, I'm a big journaler, so I'm often writing
mm.
about my feelings and what I'm experiencing. So even now, postpartum, I love to go back through my old writing and relive how it felt to first find out I was pregnant and
Yeah.
going through that whole 9-month journey. So,
Mm,
um, yeah, it was just such an amazing experience. I really feel so grateful to have become pregnant.
yeah.
And yeah, now, being a mother, it's just been, yeah, hard moments, of course, the lack of sleep,
Mm,
and it's not all easygoing, but I'm really just so grateful. And I think those
mm,
years leading up to getting pregnant definitely had an impact, I think, on
mm,
how I see myself as a mom and myself during pregnancy.
mhm. Yeah. Wow. Can I ask, and you don't have to answer this question, so if you feel uncomfortable, we're just going to cut that part out. Um, just because you mentioned you wanting to get pregnant a little bit earlier, maybe than your husband, and I know this is a topic in relationships
Mhm.
that one partner is ready a little earlier, and then the other partner is not really ready yet. How how did that feel for you, and was there something that helped you navigate that? Does something come to mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it felt frustrating. It felt
Mm,
difficult because we are also a bit older. I think I was
mm,
33 or 34 when I kind of knew I wanted to start trying. And
mm,
my husband's 3 years older than me. So
mhm.
it's not like we were a super young couple, and I
Yeah.
was trying to kind of express that to my husband, saying, and it could take us a while to conceive. So yeah, it was definitely challenging to try to find that compromise or that balance between the two of us. He really
Mm,
wanted to wait, I think, at least a year or two after we got married. Whereas for
mm,
me, we got married a little bit late and I was eager to be pregnant even before getting married.
yeah. Mm,
So I think it just took, yeah, a lot of patience, a lot of listening,
mm,
and definitely some compromise on both our sides. I think,
mm,
I was really expressing to him how important it was to me and that it could take a while. And of course,
mm,
in the end, it did take us
mm,
a while to get pregnant. So yeah, I think it was also a good experience in a way that we saw things from a different perspective, because it forced us both to
mm,
really be better listeners for each other, to both be a bit more patient, and to find a way to find that balance together as a couple.
mm,
So yeah, that whole process of expressing my needs and my desires for wanting to become pregnant, and also
mm,
trying to understand his side, And I think for men, it's also quite different. I don't think he was having this strong desire
Mm,
um, to conceive. Of course, he wanted to be a father, he wanted to have a child with me, but he didn't feel this time
mm,
constraint. And I did my best not to feel that as well. But
yeah.
I also know that it can become harder to conceive as you get older, and miscarriages can become more common. So all of
Mm,
those things were on my mind a little bit.
yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, I think it did make us stronger as a couple. That
Mm,
whole navigating that
mm,
different perspective we saw on conceiving, and then of course the year and a half that it took us to conceive. That was also a whole challenge. And my
mm,
husband was very relaxed about it. He's like, it'll happen when it happens. Not if it takes a couple years, no
mm,
big deal. Whereas for me, every month where you get your period again, it was
yeah.
pretty devastating, and it took a long
Mm,
time to let go of any expectations, and
mm,
again find the balance of letting go but also wanting to do what I could that's within my power to
mm,
optimize my chances to conceive.
mm,
Mm, but yeah, it was all a challenging time, because it's really
mm,
like a 2-3 year period of time where we
mm,
were discussing becoming pregnant, and then had the
mm,
challenges of trying to conceive.
mm.
um, but at the end of the day, I do feel pretty grateful for all of it because it brought us as a couple closer together. And
Yeah.
I know that that's not always the case. It can
Mm,
sometimes end very, very differently for a couple.
mm,
So yeah, I'm grateful that we had that time to really learn more about ourselves and each
mm,
other and navigate that space as a couple.
mm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, then take us to the moment when you found out you're pregnant. Did you take a test, or did you just, kind of have a feeling of, okay, something is happening?
Yeah, I took a test, and because I had been trying to conceive for so long, even taking these tests,
Mm,
some months I wouldn't even bother taking a test, and I would just wait for my period to come. Other months, I was just so excited and hopeful, so I'd be taking the test, right around the time I was thinking I'd get my period.
yeah.
And yeah, that Sunday morning, I just kind of did the routine test that I was taking, didn't really think too much of it, tried not to get my hopes up because
Mm,
I knew very well what it felt like to get my hopes up and then
mm,
for it to be negative. Um, so yeah, I took the test, and then I think I went to go make my coffee, kind of puttered around a little bit, went back to the bathroom and could not like really believe I saw these two lines, and I thought, "Oh, there must be something wrong here."
wrong, yeah.
Yeah, like I really did not understand. I was a bit confused by it. So I had a couple extra tests and used those, and I think 2 or 3 of them all came back positive. So I think I felt my heart rate go up a little bit. I was in a bit of shock or disbelief, and I
Yeah.
went out to the living room and just kind of passed the pregnancy test to my husband. And he couldn't read my reaction initially, so he thought, "Oh, it's okay, babe. It's like another month where is negative." He just kind of assumed that because that had been our story for quite a while, and then he kind of did a double take on my expression, and he's like, "Wait a second, something's looking different in your face." And then he looked at the test and saw that it was positive. So I think we were both pretty shocked. And then he was very excited, whereas I was still in a bit of disbelief. I think the shock, it took me like several days or maybe even weeks
Mm,
to believe. And that was one thing with my early pregnancy. It really took me quite a long time to really trust that I was pregnant and to believe
mm,
it. Like, even after
mm,
getting blood work done, having an ultrasound, like, it just took me quite a long time to come to terms with the fact that I was truly finally pregnant
yeah.
and that this pregnancy was actually going to last.
Mm,
And yeah, so that was, I said earlier that my pregnancy was such a dream, and, I had almost no real difficulties or challenges in the pregnancy. But I think that first trimester was maybe the hardest time because you don't want to get too attached
mm,
to this little life growing inside you just in case it disappears.
mm.
It's not
Yeah.
its time,
Yeah.
So I was trying to find that balance of being so excited and grateful for finally being pregnant, but then
Mm,
also, finding the balance of yeah, just not wanting to get too attached,
yeah.
to the idea or to this to this little life just in case,
Yeah.
as a way to protect myself, I think, because I had already gone through such a long journey and I was
Mm.
afraid to get hurt, I think, in that way.
Mm.
So, yeah, that first trimester, I think, was a little bit challenging. I wanted to
Mm.
just be so grateful every day and so happy to be pregnant, but,
Yeah.
I was cautious, I think, with it just in a way to protect myself.
Mm.
But yeah, I think once we had that 13-week ultrasound and you're past that first trimester, it was just, total excitement. And I just wanted to shout from the roof that I was pregnant and share it with everybody. And I think from that moment on, I was just, pure joy of being pregnant and loving this little bump that was growing in my belly. And just, yeah, the whole thing was, yeah,
Mm.
so beautiful.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. I think many women feel like that. At least I hear it a lot that, the beginning is like, oh, yeah, I'm happy, I'm grateful, but trying to stay safe kind of, nah? And not go too far so that you're still protected in a way. And I think that's so understandable and a natural reaction
Yeah,
also.
especially being a little bit older, I was 36. Well, I am 36 and I had just turned actually I conceived the weekend of my birthday, my 36th
Mm.
birthday, so
Mm.
mid-May. Of course, I
Wow.
didn't know it at the time. But I think because I'm a little bit older,
Mm.
I again had some of those fears come up of, oh, maybe this pregnancy won't last.
Mm.
Um, and not that those fears were put on me by any doctors here in Berlin. I
Mm.
never felt that I was an advanced maternal age. I was never made to feel kind of quote unquote old in my pregnancy. But I
Mm.
think just from society and the kind of discourse around being a little bit older, and of course, some
Yeah.
of the research as well, you do have some increased risks.
Mm.
So I think some of those kind of definitely made me not want to get too attached to my pregnancy early on.
Yeah.
Um, but then, yeah, finally, I made it past those first 13 weeks, and then, yeah, pure bliss after that.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, well then let's go to the pregnancy and anything that you feel is important to share about the pregnancy, but then of course also, preparing for birth. What did you do to prepare for birth?
Oh gosh, what did I not do? I think I went full on. My husband is like, "You are like, whoa, you really took this on like a full-time job."
Mm.
And I was very fortunate because I work with young children, and here in Germany, they're quite cautious of the pregnant woman. So once I
Mhm.
informed my school about my pregnancy, I was put on a work ban, the
Mhm.
Arbeitsverboten.
Mhm.
So I was very fortunate in that way because I was really able to focus entirely on having a really healthy, um, relaxing, stress-free pregnancy.
Mm.
So I really did not experience a lot of stress in my pregnancy. And I think if I was working full time,
Mm.
especially with young children, I
Yeah.
think it would have changed the experience a little bit. So again, I feel really grateful to have had the time to
Mm.
dive in so full on into the
Yeah.
world of pregnancy and labor.
Hello, beautiful women. I have to interrupt this episode because it is official. I am launching my first live online group program, and I'm so excited for it. And you are the first ones to know. I have not announced this anywhere publicly yet, just in some smaller circles and spaces, my newsletter community, and now I'm sharing it with you here on the podcast. Let me introduce you to I Am Mother Nature, a guide to intuitive, empowered birthing and mothering. I Am Mother Nature is a 3-month live online in-depth group program for the woman who wants to reclaim her rite of passage into motherhood as an inherently feminine and intuitive process. I Am Mother Nature is for the pregnant woman who knows deep inside that her intuitive and body wisdom will guide her through birth and her mothering journey. It is for the woman who feels like there is a missing piece in her innate, deeply intimate and intuitive connection to herself and the way she relates to herself, her body, and her mothering. This program is a profound and unique offer like no other that provides one-on-one personalized doula support, in-depth learning resources, and a rich and nurturing community for women. Unlike many other offerings and birth prep courses, my offer gives you the guidance, supported holding, evidence-based information, and easy-to-implement practices to become the embodied and highly in tune woman and mother you were always meant to be and already are inside. We are going to have bi-weekly live calls, weekly video and written material and resources, the option for monthly one-on-one sessions with me, and really juicy bonus material. And the cool thing is, it is a mix of online and live classes so that you can join from anywhere in the world and still get to sit with me and the other women in a live space. These are the main pillars and topics we are going to cover: embodiment practice, the feminine and womb wisdom, birth wisdom, human design, and so much more. Right now, the start date is a bit flexible. We are going to start between June 15 and August 1st. It just depends a bit on who signs up and how far along everyone is in their pregnancy. So if you want to join and you are already a bit further along in your pregnancy, then let me know now so that we can start a little bit earlier, right? So I'm just going to wait for the first few women to let me know that they are interested, and that is how I'm going to decide on the start date for this first round of I Am Mother Nature. I am offering this program to my inner circle, which is my newsletter and you, the podcast community, and friends or friends of friends, and of course your friends too. And I am offering it for a ridiculously low price for the next few weeks before I announce it publicly. After that, the price will increase. So from now on until May 23rd, 2025, you and your friends, send it to your friends. If you have a pregnant friend and you feel they could benefit from this, send it to them, can join I Am Mother Nature for a discounted friends price. And I do this because I appreciate you being here so much, and I know it will feel so through the roof amazing seeing you step into the woman and mother you were always meant to be. So, this special offer is time sensitive, so if you are curious, check out the link to I Am Mother Nature down in the notes. If you have questions, please do reach out to me. I have linked my email and my Instagram down below so you can contact me. I am so happy to hop on a call with you or answer your questions in written form. If you want to have a call, like a clarity call, just book in for a free discovery call that is also linked in the notes. If you are not sure if this program is for you, please reach out to me as well, and then we can chat and see if it is a fit. And I promise you, I'm not going to try to convince you if I don't feel it is a fit for you. For the sake of the whole group, that just wouldn't make any sense. Okay, my love, you can find the link to I Am Mother Nature down in the show notes. We start pretty soon. I am so excited. Thank you so for being here. So much love to you. And now, back to the episode.
So yeah, I had signed up for a combination prenatal yoga teacher training with doula certification, and I loved the course. It was an amazing course online, but with lots of live sessions. So I got to connect with all the women that were also participating in that course, and the teachers were incredible. And I've always been into yoga, like I mentioned before. So staying really active throughout my pregnancy, doing a lot of yoga, movement, meditation, immersing myself in the world of hypnobirthing, which I didn't know much about before. But as you know, there's a teacher here in Berlin, Chrissy, who is offering a hypnobirthing course.
Yeah.
So I took that in August and September, and that was really great to really bring in the mind a little bit. And of course, yoga has that connection of mind, body, spirit, but the hypnobirthing was such a great way to kind of guide me a little bit more. It's like I saw my hypnobirthing experience as kind of like guided meditation, and really allowing my mind to, yeah, like slow down and surrender a little bit to the process, to trust my body even more. And yeah, I think the hypnobirthing was a really big factor in supporting me with my labor.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that. Yeah, the prenatal, the doula. Um, I was back in Canada for some time during my pregnancy, and that was so special just to spend time with my family and my close friends. You know, I have a lot of childhood girlfriends that I grew up with from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. So just spending time with those incredible women was
Yeah.
so precious, you know. So I'm really grateful to have had that time back home. And I even went to Portugal for a little bit and attended um, kind of like a baby moon or like a women's retreat for pregnancy. And that was beautiful because we had this amazing blessing way, really connecting on a more spiritual level with other women that were going through a very similar experience. You know, we were all pregnant kind of in our second or early third trimester. So connecting with those mamas and yeah, just really immersing myself in this whole world. And, you know, I don't know if I will be pregnant again or have a second child. So I think for me, I just really wanted to go full on into this world of pregnancy and birth and soak in every last drop of it, you know? So I was doing all the courses and retreats and everything I could do to maximize, yeah, the joy of the experience and just connecting with other women and myself and the little life that was growing inside me. So, so yeah, I did all those things, and then I came back to Berlin at the very end of November, and that's when I started going to more prenatal yoga classes here, some sound healing and women's circles. That's where I met you, and just kind of starting to settle in a bit more to my body, the nesting, you know, making our home feel a little bit more cozy, and just really preparing for
Yeah.
when Lenny was going to join us. So yeah, it was all just so special, you know, the whole pregnancy and having the time to dedicate to learning as much as I could.
Yeah.
And yeah, really focusing on preparing myself. You know, you sometimes hear this metaphor of birth being like a marathon, you know, and you wouldn't just start a marathon without any preparation or any training. So I had a little bit of that type of mentality, you know, wanting to be very physically prepared for the birth, but also a lot of mental work. And a big part of that was getting my mind out of it, you know, surrendering to my body and just trusting my body to do what it's going to do and what it knows exactly how to do. It innately
Yeah.
knows what
Yeah.
to do. And I think a lot of the challenges that can come with labor and birth is the mind getting in the way of it, you know,
Yeah.
allowing the fears and the anxieties to really block your body from doing what it's going to do.
Yeah.
So that was a huge part of it as well. So, you know, I was going back to old books, Spiritual Midwifery, Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, Positive Birth Stories. All of that was a huge part of letting go of the mind and really just trusting my body. And I think once you get your mind out of the way and surrender to the process, it made the whole birth feel so smooth and just exactly how it was supposed to be.
Yeah. So beautiful. And I love what you're saying about because basically it's doing less with it's not doing nothing because you prepare, but it is a lot more stepping out of the way than actively, like trying to do something. And I think this is where sometimes we're a little bit misled because a lot of the practices also that we do are a lot about doing something. And then in this case, it is so much more about actually stepping back. And
Exactly.
that's such a huge difference, the two.
Exactly, especially the last couple months of pregnancy, because so much in the beginning I was very do, you know, taking the
Yeah.
courses, learning as much as I
Yeah.
could. And then as I was starting to come to the reality of, giving birth in a couple months, then
Mm.
it was very much about letting go, like,
Mm.
knowing all that I know, but then just surrendering and really falling into my body and
Mm.
remembering my kind of innate nature, my biology, my primal primitive side, and
Yeah.
trusting that that will really guide me through my birth, which is
Mm.
exactly kind of how it was in the end. It was really my body just did it, and I just kind of
Mm.
stepped back in a way, which was such an amazing thing to experience.
Mm.
But yeah, so it's an interesting balance of, yeah, being proactive and doing all that you can do to prepare, but really at the end of the day, your body's going to birth your baby.
Mm.
It's going to happen,
Mm.
and yeah, you kind of have to let go a little bit and
Yeah.
surrender to that.
Yeah. Totally. Um, when and how did you choose the place to give birth? Because here in Berlin, at least, and many other big cities in Germany, I don't know how it is in other countries, you have to very early make decisions if you want to have a decision. Like later on, there's just not really a choice anymore. So how did you go about that?
Yeah, well, I had seen my gynecologist when I found out I was pregnant, and she kind of, I think it was a website. She told me, you put in your postal code, your
Mm.
code, and then you can find midwives in the area.
Yeah.
So I did that, and literally the first midwife that came up, I contacted her, and she works at a birth house, a Geburtshaus, just down
Mm-hmm.
the street from where I live here in
Mm-hmm.
Prenzlauerberg.
Which one is it? You
Um,
want to say the name?
Geburtshaus Maya.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just,
Mm-hmm.
it's a kilometer or two from where we live.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I contacted her and we just connected right away. She
Mm.
had actually lived in Ottawa, my hometown, for a few
Oh,
years when
wow.
she was a child.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had this little connection already with Canada.
Oh.
I was looking for a midwife that was also so, fluent or comfortable in English. And yeah, so I kind of had just entered that in my postal code, and she came up, and yeah, we connected instantly. So I met her when I was 13 or 14 weeks pregnant, so
Mm.
early. And
Amazing.
and again, I think this is a huge part in, you know, preparing for birth. Or I always think now that if a woman is wanting an unmedicated birth and a physiological birth, choosing a care provider like a birth house and a midwife, it really, really supports, your wishes and your choices. And I feel, this is just my experience, but I feel having made that choice and having the continuity of care, of
Mm.
seeing the same midwife time and time again and establishing so much trust
Mm.
and connection with her,
Mm.
really had such a positive impact on allowing me to have the birth that I really wanted to have, and
Yeah.
she was so there for me to ensure that, to support me in any way to really have that birth that I wanted, so yeah, having birth at the Gebot house, I think was just such a good call for me. Like, I'm so glad I made that choice.
Mm.
Because I really felt like everything was set up to have the birth that I wanted to have,
Yeah.
and of course, if things were to have gone differently, if there was some emergency, I knew I would be transferred, and I was all prepared for that just in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
But I think if you know you want to have a physiological birth and you know you don't want medication,
Mm.
your environment is so important and so conducive to having that
Mm.
type of birth. So being
Mm.
at the birth house, the beautiful bathtub, the dim lights, having just my husband and my midwife there, it was just so intimate and peaceful that the
Mm.
environment is just so beautifully set up,
Mm.
to have that physiological unmedicated birth. So
Mm.
that was a really important thing for me. So I wasn't actively looking for a birth house, but having met Carla, and back in Canada, it's become quite, not common necessarily, but midwifery was legalized, I think, in the late 1980s. And over the decades, more and more birth centers
Mhm.
have started popping up. So
Mm.
many so that there's not enough midwifery programs for people to even
Mm.
study to become midwives. So
Mm.
they're trying to get more programs going in Canada so that they can open more birth centers. And I
Mm.
had some friends in Canada who gave birth with a midwife at a birth center. So I
Mm.
had that idea that that is something that I would also want. And and all my education from my early 20s, studying reproductive health, studying midwifery,
Yeah.
I also kind of knew that that was the care that I wanted. And then it just so happened that that first midwife that I contacted was very much aligned with that,
Yeah.
the pedagogy and the belief that these midwives have about really supporting a woman's wishes for her birth was so true. I found every step of the way she was just incredibly
Mm.
supportive, and she knew what I wanted and kind of helped ensure that things were set up in that way for me to have the birth that I wanted. So
Mm.
I will be forever grateful for Carla, my midwife. And I remember after giving birth, I think I was crying, leaving the birth house, because I was just I became so connected to her,
Mm.
and like having her support meant everything.
Yeah. Wow. That's so perfect. I'm so happy for you.
Oh, yeah,
So
I'm so
happy.
grateful.
Yeah. And I think this is what we were saying earlier. You already knew about these things, and it wasn't something like a completely new idea of, oh, you can give birth somewhere else other than the hospital. So there's this little, if you hear about something for the first time, you need some time for it to become an idea that could be a reality.
Mhm.
And if a woman can skip that, or not skip that step, but have it a bit earlier before she falls pregnant, then you do have more time and more space to dive into, these possibilities as well.
Exactly. That's why it's so nice to share the birth stories and hope that women that are either early in pregnancy or maybe not even pregnant yet kind of hear these stories to know your different options.
Yeah.
Um, Because yeah, in Canada, I think the standard practice is still just to give birth in the hospital, have your obstetrician. So
Mm,
unless you know about your options, you might just kind of go down the standard path, and that might be the right choice for many women. But if you
mm,
don't know all your choices and you don't
mm,
know all your options,
yeah.
then you can't always make the most informed decision and the thing that
Mm,
might actually be most right for you.
mm, yeah,
Mhm.
totally. Are you okay, or do you want to take a
No,
little
no,
break?
he's latched nicely, and yeah,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect. Okay, amazing. Good. Are we missing something else before we go to the actual birth?
I feel like I've shared so much already. I can always talk forever, especially on
Yeah.
this topic of pregnancy and labor and everything.
Mm,
But no, I think we've covered a lot, and I'll keep
okay.
sharing.
Yeah, 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 perfect. Okay. So wherever you feel this birth started, because no, it's also where does birth start is a really deep question. So wherever you want to start with your birth.
Yeah, well, one thing I forgot to mention when you had asked me, what were the things that you did during pregnancy?
Mm,
Another thing that I found out about through some other pregnant women here in Berlin was um, the ability to do acupuncture,
mm-hmm,
and kind of birth preparation acupuncture, and that is heavily subsidized by our healthcare. So
mm-hmm,
once I found that out, and one of the moms had mentioned a practice very near me,
mm-hmm,
here in Prenzlauer. So I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'll go visit and just have a consultation, learn a little bit more about acupuncture because I had never tried it before.
mm-hmm,
So I went to this praxis, and yeah, again had a great feeling about it. Loved the acupuncturist. They
mm-hmm,
did some blood work, and I just felt like I was in such good care. They really
mm-hmm,
let me know what my options were with the type of acupuncture I could do. So I think I started that maybe 2 months before I gave birth. It was,
mm-hmm,
yeah, when I came back to Berlin at the end of November. So all of December and January and early February, I was doing acupuncture
mm-hmm,
and acupressure massage.
mm-hmm,
And I think in the weeks leading up to birth, they do a kind of pregnancy related or labor preparation acupuncture. So I started doing that maybe 3 weeks before I gave birth, something like that. And the morning that I ended up going into labor, it was Monday morning, and I had an acupuncture appointment that morning.
mm-hmm,
I went to my acupuncturist, And I told her, "Oh, yeah, tomorrow's my due date. I'll be 40 weeks tomorrow."
Mhm.
And she said, "Oh, if you like, I can add one more pressure point. Totally optional, but it can sometimes,
Yeah.
bring a bit more energy towards the uterus and maybe not necessarily bring on surges or contractions, but, bring some energy to that area."
Yeah.
So I said, "Sure, why not?" And so she put the pin in my baby toe, like one on each baby toe. And the moment she did that, I could feel baby Lenny moving inside
Mm.
the moment that the pin went on my toes. So I thought right away, I thought, okay, something's up here. Oh, a minute, Lenny needs to latch again.
Yeah, all good.
Lenny. There we go. Yeah, so even from that very first moment, I thought, "Oh gosh, that was quite a strong reaction."
Mhm.
And then, you just kind of relax for 20 or 30 minutes while, the acupuncture it's doing its magic. Um, and yeah, after my acupuncture session, I kind of went about my regular day. I was on my bicycle, still cycling, 9 months pregnant, all over the neighborhood. And so I went to my prenatal yoga class, had a great prenatal class, joined a couple of moms to be for a coffee after the class. And the whole time I kind of had this feeling that something was a bit different. I was having
Mm.
not necessarily like a pulling across my belly, but I could just feel more activation in my stomach, womb
Mhm.
area. So I kind of had this thought at the back of my head, like, I wonder if this morning's acupuncture may have set something in motion here. But, I didn't want to think too much of it. And
Mm.
I was still felt really good. I wasn't experiencing any discomfort, just kind of a
Mm.
different sensation in my womb. So, yeah, so I went to coffee, then cycled home, bumped into a girlfriend on the way home, and little did I know that would be the last friend or the last person I would see,
Mm.
aside from my husband and my midwife before giving birth. But yeah, I cycled home around 5:30, 6 p.m. And again, all evening, I was just having this feeling that, maybe labor is going to start soon.
Mhm.
And, my husband and I still went about our evening, had dinner. I think we watched, Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park on Netflix. There was some old nostalgic movies I felt like watching. And even during the film, I was again having this more kind of pulling sensation now across my womb and kind of hips, that whole area around there, just energy around the area, but nothing that made me think I'm in labor. So I
Mhm.
don't know if this was maybe my latency phase, and you hear sometimes that acupuncture can shorten that phase of labor.
Mm.
So I think in my case, it must have, because before I knew it, I went to the bathroom at 9 p.m. and my mucus plug came out and I had a bit of blood when I wiped. So I thought, okay, that's a sign that, maybe labor's coming in the next day or two. I wasn't too sure when it would come. And I was also
Mm.
trying to prepare that, I could have a very long latency phase. For some
Mm.
women, it might be a few days even that
Mhm.
they're having this on and off
Yeah.
feeling. So I was, not getting too excited, just trying to take it easy. Um, and then, yeah, and then I think after the mucus plug came out, I think I was starting to feel these surges, just very gentle
Mm.
waves. So I was like, maybe this is early labor.
Mhm.
So I told my husband, I think I'm going to go to bed. This was maybe around 11 p.m. Like, yeah, let me get some rest, just in case. And I had texted my midwife just so she knew that, things were potentially starting.
Yeah.
So I came to the bedroom, and a girlfriend had told me about this app, Freya app.
Mhm.
It might be from the birth company, the Positive Birth Company or something. And you can basically listen to guided meditations or hypnobirthing on it. And then when you're having these surges, you can time them, but it also does some breath work with you. So I was kind of breathing in it to the count of 4, breathing out to the count of 8. And I
Mhm.
was really using that to kind of feel grounded and kind of supported through these surges that were growing a little bit in intensity.
Mm.
So I was listening to that while I was trying to drift off to sleep. And then around midnight, I heard this very clear pop, like a balloon, inside my body. And I thought, what on earth? Like I'd never felt or heard anything like that. But of
Mhm.
course, I was like, oh, well, that might be my water breaking. Let's
Yeah.
see. And a few seconds later, I could feel this trickle. So I was like, okay, my water's broke. This
Mhm.
is probably a sign that labor is happening or, beginning for sure. So again, I texted my midwife to let her know. And yeah, I think from the moment my water broke, the surges started to come on more strongly,
Mm.
but I was using that hypnobirthing. I was kind of going in and out between the bedroom and the living room. Um, my husband, I had kind of trained him as a bit of a doula since I had done my doula training. So I had, tried to prepare him as much as possible with all the counter pressures and helping me with breathing. And we even bought an inflatable tub, an inflatable pool, thinking
Mhm.
that we might set that up at home
Mhm.
because I did want to try to labor at home for as long as possible.
Mm.
But in the end, yeah, we didn't use the tub. I never went in the shower for laboring at home. It was more just really going internal, like really focusing on my breathing, um,
Mm.
these positive affirmations, really using my hypnobirthing tools, and then having my husband support me with a lot of counter pressure.
Mm.
So, really, between the counter pressure and the hypnobirthing and breathing, I felt very like not, I don't know if in control is the right word, but I never felt overwhelmed by
Mm.
the surges. There were moments where they felt really intense,
Mm.
and I would just kind of double down on focusing internally, on my breath
Yeah.
work. I think my eyes were probably closed for almost the entire labor at home. It was
Mm.
really, really internal. Um, and at a certain point, probably around 3, 4, 5 in the morning, I started vocalizing a lot more. So
Mhm.
this much more primal, animalistic side kind of
Mhm.
just came out of me. And I really had no idea how I would labor. I had heard that some women can be very loud and very vocal, and others very, very quiet and very internal. And I think for me, it started like that, but then before I knew it, I was roaring like a lion, when I wasn't having my surges, I was wondering, "Oh gosh, are the
The
neighbors here?
neighbors.
Somebody's gonna call the police or something," wondering what on earth is going on in our apartment.
Yeah.
Because I was letting it all out, so it was never like a scream or anything, but just these deep, guttural, roaring sounds,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I remember, I don't know if it was in my doula course or where I had learned it, but, when I had learned a bit about vocalizing, I had learned that it's good to keep the sounds very low and kind of like these vowel sounds, ooh, ah, ee, oh,
Mhm.
like really keeping it low. So anytime I felt like the surge became quite intense, I was very consciously trying to bring my tone back down.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
think that was very helpful. It really helped me feel grounded again, any
Mm.
moment where the surges were intense.
Mm.
Yeah, so that carried on, I think, until around 6 in the morning, and then my husband called, our midwife, and she could just hear me in the background, so she kind of knew. She's like, "Oh, yeah, that you're probably in transition even." And I was having these urges to bear down and to push. Also, that was already
Mhm.
happening at home. So, I
Mhm.
was already feeling inside, wondering if I could feel Lenny's head, like, how close am I to actually giving birth?
Yeah.
Mm, but yeah, so we had, the midwife could hear me and she said, "All right, I'll meet you at the birth house in 45 minutes."
Mhm.
So she headed there first, started to run the bath, set up the room, and we got there around 7, I think 7:30 in the morning, something like that.
Mm. How did you
And
go there? How
we had joked that,
you could
little did
walk?
I know that labor would be so intense, but Jackie and I are both big cyclists, so we're like, "Oh, yeah, maybe we'll cycle over to the birth house," or we have this little wagon at the back of our bicycle, so I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I'll just hop into the little trolley," and Jackie will cycle me over to the birth house. My husband just popped in now, he's giggling at this part of the story. So,
I would actually, you know what, I would not be surprised to see a scene like that because here, for everyone who doesn't live in Berlin, everyone's on their like big bikes with these big, I don't know what it's called in English, like these wagons
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And so that is like a normal picture, and I wouldn't even, be surprised to see a laboring woman in one of these.
Exactly, and I really thought, I might have this long latency phase, so maybe I will feel good enough to be in the wagon, or, and ours is not even a big one, it's this tiny little trolley that we put groceries in, it's not even a big one, but I'm quite a small person, so I was like, "Oh, yeah, I can fit in that little trolley, no problem." But, of course, the reality of being in the throes of labor, and I was definitely in active labor, this was no latency, early labor phase, so, yeah, it's funny because in the moments of the surges, it's so powerful, so intense. But when the surge went down, when the wave decreases, I really kind of felt back to my regular self. Like in those moments, I kind of felt like I could probably hop in a trolley and head down to the birth house on the bicycle. But by then, I was only having a few minutes in between each surge. So yeah, we didn't want to risk it. So we had just an Uber come to the apartment. I had
Okay.
my headphones in, my eye mask on. I just stayed in my zone.
Mhm.
And thankfully, since the birth house was so close, it was probably a 3-minute drive, very
Oh,
close.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel really lucky with that as well because I didn't have to, labor for 20 minutes, a half hour, 45 minutes in a car. I think that would be quite challenging.
Mm.
Yeah, and I got to the birth house and I just headed straight to the birth room. Carla was running the bathtub. I think I sat on the toilet a little bit, and when the bath was ready, I just hopped in, and it felt amazing. I'm a real water baby. I love the hot tub, and I love the lakes and the sea, and it felt so
Mhm.
good to just be immersed in this warm water.
Mm.
And Jackie was great. My husband, he, got the music going. We had this little Lenny's Journey, we called it, a playlist.
Mm.
And it was all the old songs that I grew up listening to that my parents loved. So,
Yeah.
Joni Mitchell, Neil Young,
Aw.
Dylan, just
Oh.
all these old folk tunes from the 60s and 70s that have always just made me feel so connected to this. I don't know, maybe my childhood part or just
Mm.
this other time, the time of my parents when they were younger.
Mm.
So having that music play, we had some aromatherapy. Jackie put some lavender oil in the tub. It was just so peaceful. And,
Mm.
the lights were very, very dim. So it just felt so relaxing. And I think once I
Mm.
was at the birth house, I surrendered even more to the process of labor and I just let it unfold. And
Mm.
I was continuing to roar like a lion, for all of these surges, and it felt so great. And another thing.
Mm. Kathleen, I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me.
Are you still there, Marie?
Oh, wait, now I can hear you again.
Yes, I think
Um,
I somehow got disconnected from
I
the.
think we're back. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
perfect.
I lost you. You said you were really going into the zone and it felt so relaxing and kind of around there.
Yeah, yeah. So I was definitely vocalizing a lot again, probably getting louder and louder. Um, and yeah, at first it was just my one midwife for that first hour or two, and then the second midwife came because I think once you
Mm.
get closer to actually giving birth, they usually have a second midwife there. And in the weeks leading up to the birth, I had an appointment with my midwife where she was asking more about the specifics of my birth preferences.
Mm.
Do you want to labor in the tub? Do you want to catch your baby?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to cut the umbilical cord? Like all of these kinds of more details. So.
Mm.
Do you want your birth to be filmed or any photos? So I had kind of shared all of this with her beforehand. So it was so great. I didn't really need to think of any of those decisions during the birth. And when the second midwife arrived, yeah, she was filming parts of the labor and she caught the entire birth on video. So I have my
Wow.
birth video, which it's been amazing to also rewatch
Oh,
it, and just
wow.
relive that moment. So there's some photos and some videos. I mean, not the best quality or anything. The lights are very dark and you can only see so much. But
Mm.
just to hear myself, it was really interesting to hear that primal vocalization
Mm.
and again to watch myself have these surges and then to go back down to kind of my normal. I remember I was chatting with the midwives, kind of laughing. I was like, yeah, I think I can feel Lenny's head, he's getting lower and lower. So it's amazing that, like, even though my labor was about 14 or 15 hours, you're only having those surges or those intense moments for maybe a few hours of your whole laboring experience.
Mm.
So much of it was also these calm moments where I was just relaxing in the tub, enjoying the music,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with my partner, connecting with the midwives. So, yeah, it was just interesting to observe myself when I was watching the video and see how how relaxed I was when I was not having my surges, just chatting like it's any other day.
Mhm.
I think we forget about that sometimes in labor, that you can have those calm moments.
Mm.
Of course, some of that energy is spent just resting and really kind of preparing for the next surge.
Yeah.
But I definitely had moments where I was just chatting and just feeling really good. Like, if you saw me in that moment, you wouldn't even think that I was in labor.
Yeah.
So that was so crazy to see. Um, but yes, I was in the tub for probably 2 hours, and I think my labor slowed down a little bit.
Mm.
And because I'm such a water baby and I love the hot water, I was kind of, asking my husband to keep adding more hot water. So at a
Mhm.
certain point, the midwife said, well, probably best to get out of the tub a little bit, also give Lenny a bit of a break. His
Mm.
heart rate was great the whole time, but at the very end in the tub, I think it got a little bit high. So they thought, what, let's give a break from the tub. You can always go back in after, a half
Mhm.
hour or something. But
Mm.
um, being in the tub for so long may have also slowed down the labor a little bit.
Mhm.
So I was also very open to try a different position, get out of the tub. And the moment I got out of the tub, I don't know if it was gravity or what, but I could definitely feel um, this. I mean, I was feeling the urge to bear down and push basically the entire time I was at the birth house and even at home. But then it became much more intense when I was
Mm.
standing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think from the moment I got out of the tub, I was maybe 45 minutes or an hour more of pushing, and then Lenny came.
Mm.
So I was on the birth stool for a little bit. I was
Mhm.
squatting. I was kind of in a tabletop position, and then putting my arms around my husband's waist. So I was
Mhm.
kind of doing all these different positions on land.
Mhm.
And at one moment, I think I actually asked the midwife for a mirror. I think I said, "Oh, do you have a mirror?" And they're like, "Oh, yes, yes," because I think that was also one of my birth preferences.
Mhm.
So they gave me a mirror, and I was able to look down and actually see
Mm.
Lenny crowning, and that was
Mhm.
amazing to see. There's a tiny bit of his head that comes, and then it goes back in, and it goes out again, and goes back in, and
Yeah.
again, like we said earlier, the body and nature is so wise and so
Yeah.
smart; it knows exactly what to do, and it was kind of allowing my perineum and my vagina to very slowly and gently open and
Yeah.
stretch.
Yeah.
And again, just breathing through it, being patient, surrendering to what my body needs to do.
Mm.
And so that was actually really beautiful to see and to experience, and to really focus on allowing my body to just do what it's going to do.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was doing much. I was having this fetal ejection reflex, I think it's called, where the body is just, my uterus was just contracting, and it was at its own pace, bringing Lenny down. And,
Mm.
and I didn't really have to do much, honestly. My body was pushing him out, and
Mm.
I just needed to kind of stay in control a bit of my breath to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't, I was just roaring like a lion. And, and I think the only like, because I've told a number of friends and family my birth story, and often people ask, was it painful? You get that
Mhm.
question a lot. And I can genuinely say, like, the whole labor never felt painful. I would never describe what I experienced as pain.
Mhm.
Yes, it was intense. Yes, it was the most powerful, humbling experience of my life,
Mm.
but I would not ever describe it as pain for me, from my
Mm.
experience. The
Yeah.
only moment that I think was kind of what I would maybe use the word painful for was the moment of crowning. So
Yeah.
when Lenny's head, when it's that full 10 centimeters and your body is stretched to its absolute maximum, I
Mhm.
was experiencing that ring of fire, I think people call it.
Yeah.
So really this powerful burning, this very intense
Yeah.
burning sensation. And I remember at that moment really being consciously aware of, like, okay, I think this is painful. This moment I would
Mhm.
describe as that. But all
Mm.
the hours leading up to it, the entire labor, I
Mm.
never felt
Mm.
anything that I would describe as pain. It was just the
Mm.
crowning was that burning sensation, and that was a bit painful. And
Mm.
at that moment, I remember my midwife saying, try not to push just when you're having your surge, you're
Mm.
bearing down, but try not to be bearing down too much when you're not having your surge. And I think she had advised me to do that just to prevent any possible tearing.
Yeah.
But in that moment, I just wanted Lenny out. So I think I was having the natural reflex, but I think I was also just having this deep desire to push and to bear down.
Mhm.
So yeah, I was bearing down probably a little bit more than I should, and I did tear a little bit. And that probably was the moment when Lenny's head came out.
Mhm.
I think it was in the same surge, I caught his head. I was in this kind of
Mm.
semi-yogi squat
Mm.
position, squatting with one leg and then kneeling with the other.
Mhm.
And so I caught his head, and the next moment I knew his whole body was out. So
Wow.
I caught my baby, brought him up to my belly,
Wow.
and it was just amazing. I couldn't
Mm.
believe it that I was finally holding him.
Mhm.
And the midwives are so gentle and so calming because I didn't even realize it, but Lenny had his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck.
Mhm.
And my midwife just said, "Oh yeah, like there's the umbilical cord around Lenny's neck." And he was still in my hands. And just very gently, she put two fingers, kind of underneath the umbilical cord, very gently put it over
Mm.
his head. No drama, no fuss. He was never taken away from me. It was just the
Yeah.
most gentle. She was informing me that it was there, and she gently unraveled it. It was just wrapped one time and pretty
Mhm.
loose because it looked like it came off very easily. And that was that. And it
Yeah.
didn't really have any, I never felt any anxiety or nervousness about it. It was just, oh yeah, we'll move that out of the way so I can kind of
Mhm.
pick him up and hold him a little bit closer.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think I was on the ground for a couple minutes just soaking it all in. And
Mhm.
my midwives and husband helped me up onto the bed. And then, yeah, we began our life as parents, and little Lenny, yeah, made his debut. And yeah, and when I caught him, I think I may have mentioned it earlier to you, but the moment I looked at him, his eyes were wide open. He had some bubbles coming out of his mouth as he was
Yeah.
taking his first breaths, but he never
Mhm.
had that big baby scream. Sometimes you
Mhm.
hear about babies screaming and then oh, okay, great, they're breathing, everything's fine. Him,
Mhm.
he was just the most gentle little welcome to the world. I could hear him cooing and kind of clearing out his lungs, but
Mhm.
nothing super loud or dramatic.
Mm.
He was just cooing and looking up
Mhm.
at me. And yeah, we went onto the bed, and that was that. My placenta came very easily, maybe 30, 40
Mhm.
minutes later. So I'm really grateful for that as well. The placenta was all intact.
Yeah.
Um, and interestingly, like when I was having my surges in labor with Lenny, I never felt any um, pain or even discomfort. I wouldn't describe it as that. But when the
Mhm.
placenta came, I really
Mm.
would use the word contraction. Like I felt like I was having a contraction in my womb and the
Mhm.
placenta came out.
Mhm.
Whereas I wouldn't use that word for the labor. It was a
Mhm.
different experience of
Mhm.
contraction and surge with the
Mm.
placenta,
Yeah.
and that felt a little bit uncomfortable when I was birthing the placenta, but it didn't it was completely different than the experience of labor or birth for Lenny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was all very smooth. The midwives kind of do a bit of a visual check on Lenny, making sure he's
Mhm.
breathing well, his color's good, all of that. And
Mhm.
once the placenta was birthed, they just, left us alone for about an hour and a half. We had this
Mm.
beautiful golden time. I was able to see the primal side of Lenny as well, where he was on
Mhm.
my belly and you could see him kicking with his legs, almost following that dark line that comes along the belly and then up to your
Mhm.
darkened nipples. And he
Mhm.
found his way up there and was
Mm.
latching and drinking the
Mm.
colostrum. So that was an amazing primal moment again.
Mhm.
It's so cool to have this primal side that comes out in us and to
Yeah.
experience that. Okay, Delaney. There we go.
He's like, yes, that's what I did. I went up the belly.
Exactly. Yeah, I went for mama's milk, which he's doing right now. Yeah, so it was just so cool to see these
Mm.
deep primal animalistic sides of us. Like I love
Yeah.
it made me feel very connected to like my ancestors or something, like a
Mm.
time way before the society in which we live in now,
Yeah.
feeling really connected to my lineage of maybe hundreds or thousands of years ago. And
Yeah.
it's so cool to see that in your child and in your body throughout pregnancy and birth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was all really amazing. Yeah, we stayed at the birth house, I think, for about 4 hours.
Mhm.
I had that minor tear I was telling you about. So the midwives
Mhm.
put a bit of a numbing gel. They stitched me up, maybe took about 15 or 20 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, they gave me some tea. I had a little bit of a snack
Mhm.
and yeah, took a bit of a shower. And yeah, we headed home that very evening. I think I gave
Mhm.
birth around noon
Mhm.
and we headed home around 4 or 5.
Mm.
And yeah, we had our first evening together as a little family of 3.
Yeah.
Um, I think what was it was kind of funny. We ordered a Burgermeister for dinner. We had some burgers and milkshakes. I was like just wanting something really filling and tasty. But I
Yeah.
was also so exhausted from the birth. I think I had like 2 or 3 bites of my burger
Yeah.
and just, passed out with Lenny.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it just felt so normal and natural, like a
Mm.
beautiful birth. And then we just went home that
Mm.
very evening, afternoon, and yeah, we've been a little family of three ever since, just
Mm.
finding our way through early
Mm.
parenthood and taking care of this little one.
Mm. Wow.
But yeah.
And what did you do with the placenta? What did the midwife show you the
Yes,
placenta?
actually, yeah, we had a bit of a tutorial almost on the
Mm-hmm.
placenta because my midwife knows I'm so curious and I'm eager
Mm-hmm.
to learn
Mm-hmm.
everything
Mm-hmm.
with when it comes to birth. So yeah, she gave us a bit of an anatomy kind of
Mm-hmm.
workshop on the placenta in the hours after I gave birth. So yes, so she showed us the placenta, the front and the back. She showed me the side that had kind of been attached to my uterus, and
Mm-hmm.
also the sac that Lenny had lived in for 9 months. So we got to see the kind of skin of the sac that
Yeah.
he was in, and that was really amazing. And yeah, we kept the placenta. I don't know if it's common elsewhere in the world, but here in Germany, there's a bit of a history of homeopathic medicine, and some of
Mm-hmm.
the apothecs, the apothecaries, um, allow you to submit some of the placenta, and you can create these placenta nosodins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I had a girlfriend tell me about that. So I thought, oh, why not? I can give that a try. And they actually just arrived a few days
Mm.
ago. So I've been taking
Amazing.
some of these globulins. Is it
Globally, yeah.
globally? Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it's completely new to me. I don't know much about homeopathic medicine
Mm.
or about this way of um, uh, using the placenta. I had just
Mm.
known about, your standard placenta encapsulation that you can take,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I also considered doing. But in the end, I was curious to try this approach.
Mm.
So we basically had given a bit of the placenta to the apothecary for making these globulins. And now the rest of the placenta is in the freezer, and we're just trying to decide what we want to do with it. Maybe plant it with a tree or do some placenta art or, put it in a smoothie maybe. I'm not really sure
Mm-hmm.
what we'll do with it yet, but I really did not want the placenta to become medical waste. I really wanted, it's just such an amazing organ, this tree of life kind
Yeah.
of. It's such a beautiful organ, and
Yeah.
it's just amazing. I'm fascinated by the placenta. So I'll have to do a little thinking of what I want to do with the rest of it.
Mm. Yeah. I
Mhm.
love that. I love that you have the globally
Yeah.
now, because it's also very curious. I talked to a friend about this too. There's not really like one use for it, because usually with these homeopathic remedies, you're like, okay, you should take this dose for this and this thing, and then it takes this and this long. But with the placenta ones, it's like, what are you going to use it for? You just have to intuitively feel into it and decide. So,
Exactly. Yeah, it was so cool to learn about this placenta nosodin because I think there's some that I can use to help with breast production. There's some to
mm-hmm,
help, when Lenny gets some of his vaccines, things he can
mm-hmm,
take. So I'm really curious to dive deeper into this whole
yeah,
homeopathic care. And I think it's such a nice complementary type
mm,
of care, so there might be other things I do as well to support
mm,
my body and Lenny. But it's so
mm,
nice to know that the placenta is also involved in our whole
yeah,
bonding and healing and whole postpartum
mm,
journey. And I think some of these globulins, you can use them for many years to come. So I'm
yeah,
excited to have that as part of our postpartum journey over the coming months and years.
yeah. Amazing. So beautiful.
Mm.
I love your story so much. I'm already looking forward to, listening back and like editing and um you went back home and spent the first night together at home, and now you are 1 month postpartum. Is there anything you want to say about the postpartum time? And yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe I expected it to be, I don't want to say more challenging than it has been, because there have definitely been moments that have been
Mm,
challenging. Um,
mm,
but I think I was really trying to prepare myself for the hormonal drops. You hear a lot
mm-hmm,
about postpartum anxiety and even just how intense it can be in the days
mm,
after birth, especially around day 3, I think, when your
mm-hmm,
milk comes in.
mm-hmm,
So I was really prepared for some of those challenges and preparing my husband and everything.
Yeah.
And the third day was challenging. That was the day that my milk came in. And
Mhm.
because I gave birth in the birth house, we had to go to the pediatrician for the U2, the U2
Mhm.
appointment. And I
Mhm.
was not ready to leave my little bubble. You know, my
Mhm.
oxytocin bubble was so precious. I was just riding this birth high, feeling
Yeah.
so good. And I had to leave that bubble for
Yeah.
only an hour, but
Yeah.
that was a really emotional period of time. You know, I was crying on the way to the doctor's office. I really didn't want to leave the home or leave
Yeah.
this bubble we had. So that was a tough day, and the milk coming in was tough.
Mm.
I knew that your breasts can get really engorged, but I didn't know that it could go all the way up into the armpits. And I really had these
Mm.
like golf ball size balls
Mhm.
all the way up into my armpits, which was painful.
Yeah.
So yeah, the postpartum period has definitely had its challenges, but um, I was also, and maybe I still am riding this birth high, you know, like I think again, when you have an unmedicated birth and a physiological birth and everything lines up beautifully as it did in our case, you have all that perfect cocktail of hormones at
Yeah.
play. And I just felt so good
Mm.
in the hours, days, and even weeks now, postpartum. You okay there,
Mhm.
Lynn? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. How are you feeling postpartum, Lenny? You still adjusting to the
You're
outer
gonna
world?
say something?
Yeah. Can make a little sound for us? Yeah. So yeah, it's had its challenges, but I think, yeah, again, the body is so smart. It knows to give you these amazing boosts of oxytocin. And yeah, I've just been feeling so grateful, so good. Really grateful for such a healthy, happy baby. Like Lenny's been a real
Mm.
angel for us. We've been really lucky.
Mm.
So yeah, it's been a positive postpartum period, but it's often a
Mm.
part that I think we forget about. You know, even with my doula training, I was so focused on the birth preparation and the labor, you know, and everybody tells you, you know, don't forget about that postpartum period. The
Mhm.
breastfeeding journey can have its challenges, the sleep deprivation, all of that.
Yeah.
And it's true. I think it's really important to prepare for that
Mm.
time after birth.
Mm.
And and yeah, it can be challenging. You know, we've had this past week was a little bit more challenging because Lenny lost a little bit of weight, and I was
Mhm.
concerned maybe my milk production was a bit low, you know, so you kind of go through these
Mm.
ups and downs a little bit.
Yeah.
And you know, you just want your baby to be happy and healthy and to be getting all the nutrients that he
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
But no, overall, it's been a really good postpartum period as well. And yeah, I just
Mm.
feel so happy and so grateful.
Mm. Yeah. I love that. And I wrote this to you when you reached out to me because you said like, "Oh, I'm feeling so good." And I said to you, it's you are I believe is not even the word for it. I can't say I know because, you know, what do we know? But I know that you're meant to feel like that. And that birth, like this whole birth talk, you know, positive births, natural births, physiological births. It goes beyond the actual birth. It is your preparation for your start into your mothering journey too.
Yeah.
And so many things that we see, so many struggles that women have postpartum, we can look at the birth and say, okay, it kind of started there and it just interrupted that whole hormonal orchestration that then, of course, how is it supposed to work afterwards? Now, if we already
Exactly.
stop it at the
Exactly.
beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been sharing my birth story with my mom, and it
Mm,
almost brought her to tears because she was saying, you know, we've had a lot of generations of birth trauma. You know, my mom had an
mm,
emergency C-section with her first birth. My
mm,
grandmother grew up in the kind of twilight birth era where
mm.
a lot of women were given drugs and were totally unaware and have no memory of their birth
Yeah.
in the 40s and 50s. They were still happening in Canada.
Mm,
So my mom was just so happy that in a way this cycle of birth
mm.
trauma has kind of ended in a
Oh,
sense. Like
yeah. I
she
get
felt,
goosebumps when you say
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
because when she gave birth in the 80s, you know, midwifery wasn't even legalized in Ontario, in our
That's
part of
so
Canada.
crazy. That's
So
so
she never even
crazy.
had the option to have a midwife,
Yeah.
you know.